Welcome everyone and good evening. I think we're about to get started. I'm Dean Marriott, Environmental Services Director for Portland. If everyone will get comfortable, I think you'll enjoy yourself, and I know I will. I get to introduce a lot of very interesting people. Right now we're going to have a message from Congresswoman Suzanne Bonamici, and after that I'll come back and say a few words.
Hello, and welcome to this year's North American World Environment Day. Oregon's environmental achievements set an example for the rest of the country and the world. From the bottle bill to our land use laws to clean energy innovation, Oregon has shown the rest of the country and the world how we can live sustainably and protect our natural environment. I congratulate Mayor Hales and the other local leaders for preserving that legacy, and thank Amy Frankel and the United Nations for spotlighting these efforts during this global celebration. In Washington, D.C., I'm continuing to work for progress on many environmental issues, but especially global climate change. The need for action could not be more urgent. Let's use today to celebrate the positive things we've already achieved and prepare to double our efforts for the work ahead. Happy World Environment Day to Portland, North America, and everyone celebrating around the world.
Well, thank you again. I'm going to be your Master of Ceremonies, along with, it's a rare treat for me to actually share this responsibility with Susan Anderson, the Director of Planning and Sustainability for the city. So, lest you think I'm a quick change artist, and the next time you see someone come up here, be Susan. So, this is a special evening capping off a lot of activities around the area. Hundreds of events in the last few days just to help focus on the World Environment Day designation. We're really honored that the United Nations Environment Program has chosen Portland, and in tonight's program we hope to highlight some of the reasons why we were selected to be the host city this year. In fact, just yesterday at a press conference, Mayor Charlie Hales announced a number of fresh initiatives to keep Portland moving forward in the arena of sustainability, including, just to name a few, making sure the city divests all of its financial holdings from the fossil fuel industry. Buying 100% renewable energy and working with our utility partners to reduce the region's reliance on coal and natural gas. Reinvigorating the city's 2009 Climate Action Plan with a goal of further reducing emissions from the city's operations. And fourth, challenging more bureaus of the city to achieve Salmon Safe certification, to join the Parks Bureau in achieving Salmon Safe certification within the next 2 years. So there's some four new bold actions that will keep the city moving forward and keep the region moving forward toward the goals of sustainability that we all share. But I just want to say, if everything we talk about and everybody who's helped this region garner the designation that we've been talking about this evening, we're here tonight, we couldn't meet here, we'd have to be over at the convention center, because this really has taken the efforts of a lot of people from this region. And we're really happy that you're here, but there are a lot more people who actually are not here this evening that have helped this region earn its reputation, and we want to be sure to thank all of them. We hope you enjoy the evening. We hope that when you leave, you feel inspired, but don't leave quite yet. Before moving on, I want to acknowledge, you saw as you came in that beautiful film there that was behind you. It's called Welcome Home. It's a video tribute to salmon. acknowledging the significant role that salmon plays to our region. And one of the artists that made the film, Chris Klaus, a student at the Pacific Northwest College of Art, is here. If Chris would stand up and be recognized. Where is Chris? Right there. Thank you, Chris. Chris, along with fellow student Stephanie Fogler, created that film, and it truly is inspirational. Thank you. And now I want to introduce my colleague Susan Anderson, the Director of Planning and Sustainability. Susan?
Good evening. It's been a long day, I know already. So thank you, Dean, and thanks to everyone here for coming to celebrate. The great thing about a place, about Portland really, in these kinds of situations is when you do these events, half the people in the room are already your friends, and so you get to have a little party and along with everybody else, which is great. I think we have a tradition in Portland, really, that when we come together and work on anything, we tend to build partnerships, and we bring together business and nonprofits and environmental groups and cultural groups and educators and the arts. And many of us have met before, and not only have we met, we've worked before, we've often played before, we get things done together. And I think that's really different than a lot of other cities. So in Portland, we really know how to do partnerships. We know how to bring business together with the environment, with educators, with the arts and the economy. And we know that we're stronger when we work together. We all know that anything we do in Portland, if you try to do it just on your own, you're not going to get it done. You need to bring the neighborhoods along, you need to bring the businesses along, you need to bring other folks along. And I think that's one thing we've really learned. A good example of that is the work that Dean really champions at the Bureau of Environmental Services. He and his team work to protect Portland's rivers and streams and watersheds. He brings together very diverse partners, from Friends of Trees to neighborhood groups to the Army Corps of Engineers, working together. And though it seems like we've always done it this way, I think I really saw a shift about a decade ago. When this was really formalized, and in 2006 we adopted Portland's Watershed Management Plan. And I think that's when watersheds really became what I'd call infrastructure. Just like pipes and pumps and water treatment facilities, they need to be planned and protected and restored as vital clean water infrastructure. Portland's proven that investments in green infrastructure, they work. They're practical, they're cost-effective, they can enhance neighborhoods and contribute to the economy, and they can significantly leverage other resources. And so I know Mike Houck always talks, and a lot of us always talk about our green infrastructure versus our gray infrastructure. When we were first saying those words, like 15 years ago, people would look at us like we were crazy. Now I think we're all talking about it, and we know that there's value there, and that you don't just need to build a pipe, and you don't just need to build the gray infrastructure to get work done. So in a lot of ways, this really mirrors the work that's happened over really a couple of decades now on climate change. It's all about building partnerships and leveraging resources. We started our work on climate change back in 1993, back when they called it global warming. We wrote our first global warming plan in 1993. I still have the floppy disk it was written on. So, when I do talks about climate change, I'll often show our original plan with the floppy disk up there. And I've had people, like especially students, younger people, come up and go, "What was that thing that was in the slide there?" So. Anyway, times have gone on 20 years later, and when we talked about climate change then, it's a lot like we talk about it now. Many of us care about it, but it is a big, scary thing. And what we found out clearly was it's the other benefits that go along with working on climate change. When we work on reducing energy use and fossil fuel use, we also end up helping families save money, helping businesses reduce their operating costs, reducing local air pollution, finding places for people to be able to bike and walk, and really building wonderful, walkable, livable communities. We thought we were working on climate change, but what we were really doing was creating a community that people really want to live at. So the 1993 plan has been updated regularly and has really been a success since 1990, while the rest of the United States carbon emissions, on average, have gone up 9%. Here in Portland, our carbon emissions are down 8%. So huge difference. And if all of my friends hadn't moved here from the Bay Area, it would have been down even more, because per capita emissions are down 28%. And so, you know, part of that is that we have become, but that's actually just a reflection of the world. The population is growing, and so we have a lot of work to do. You know, going down 8% seems like a big deal, and yet really we have a long way to go. So I think just like the work on watersheds, this work has been successful because we've had these amazing, fantastic, creative collaborations. And that doesn't happen in every community. So tonight, in honor of the diversity of players that have made Portland a success, we all get to see and hear highlights of many of our partners' stories. Before we move on, I want to do a couple of things. One thing is I want to thank PGE, who has been our host this evening. Are there folks here from PGE? So a couple of weeks ago, I had the pleasure of going to their board of directors meeting to provide them with an honor, which was the Sustainability at Work Gold Level Certification, which is a certification we do for businesses for their internal business practices. So they're doing some wonderful things to really promote sustainable economic development and environmental responsibility. I'd also like to give a special shout out to a couple of partners. These include Colin Thorne. Is Colin here? Colin is right there. So Colin is visiting us from the university, from Nottingham University in the UK, and he's currently working with PSU on a research project there on integrated management of urban water and green spaces. It's an alliance with the Intertwine Alliance, with PSU, with the city, and Clean Water Services. A great project. I also want to recognize Sarah Heineke. Is Sarah? Where's Sarah? Where is she? Anyway, Sarah's not here, but she's running something called the Lloyd Eco District, which is a great partnership, again, with the city. And she took Amy Frankel, the UN Environment Program Director for the US, on a great tour of the Lloyd District today. So finally, for those of you who didn't have a chance to go out and look at some of the information that was outside, I wanted to highlight some of our business and NGO partners. They have displays here tonight: Lucid Energy, Imagine Energy, Solarize Portland, Solve, Hands on Greater Portland, Climate Solutions, and of course the Bureau of Environmental Services and my own department, the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability.
And I'm really excited now to introduce to you the First Lady of Oregon, Sylvia Hayes. It's a pleasure to have Sylvia here with us today. I was talking to her earlier, and this whole subject matter is right in her wheelhouse. She's, for more than 2 decades, exhibited her professional experience with sustainable economic development, clean energy, workforce development, green buildings, preventing waste of all kind. Please join me in welcoming First Lady of Oregon, Sylvia Hayes.
Well, hello, everybody. Hello. I am just really delighted to be here, and Governor Kitzhaber also says hello and congratulations to Portland and to Oregon. We're here to celebrate some of Portland's successes and also just to take a moment to really appreciate this magnificent environment. You know, I think I was really fortunate because I found my calling pretty early in life. For as long as I can remember, I have believed that the miraculous diversity of life on this small blue planet was sacred and worthy of protection. And really, since my early 20s, I've been on a mission toward committing my life to making the transition to an economy that actually increases prosperity for people while being environmentally restorative. And over all the years since, I've been really fortunate to meet and work with amazing people all around the world who are really working toward that same mission. Nearly 20 years ago, I set out to make my home and really build my career in Oregon, in large part because of the incredible progress and environmental sustainability that was happening here, the real commitment to walking, to walking the talk, and I wanted to be part of that. I had very little money at that time, and I was literally living out of my car with my 2 dogs, and I set my tent up on BLM land out near Redmond, Oregon. And it truly was, and I tried to figure out how the heck am I going to survive financially while I start building this work. And it was, I cannot credit enough and then in the years since, I have built that business, I have got established here, I met the man of my life, and I became First Lady. That's been quite a journey. And I can't credit enough the Environmental Center out of Bend and also the Oregon League of Conservation Voters Lobby Day. The Environmental Center, they did not have, a job for me when I showed up, but they helped direct me to little piecemeal contracts here and there that enabled me to get started and pay the bills along with cleaning cabins and personal training and all kinds of other stuff. And then I attended my first OLCV Lobby Day. And that was when I really learned that politicians put their pants on one leg at a time, just like I did. And that gave me the nerve to run for the legislature in 2002. And I was in a no chance of winning campaign, but I really worked hard, and I used the campaign to elevate issues, including environmental issues and clean energy issues. And John, the once and current governor, was governor at that time, and he came out to do a fundraiser for me, and that's the first time I met him. And lo and behold, a little while later, we met again and we started dating, and as you can see, the rest is history. And so I have to really kind of credit the environmental movement, not only with my career, but with the love of my life. So quite a life is totally impossible to predict, I think. A colleague of mine recently said that an environmental ethic is really in Oregon's DNA. And I like the sound of that. I like the feel of that. Here in Portland and with us tonight, we have innovations in the energy world. Lucid Energy. They are now going to be harnessing the energy generating power from the pipes beneath us right now that are already generating water. New generation infrastructure. Eco-districts, which are bringing together business, academia, and policymakers to really rethink and retool our neighborhoods to be powerhouses of self-sustaining vibrancy and energy and even new forms of commerce. We have folks helping us build community through solarizing our neighborhoods and really making solar energy accessible to more and more people across the income spectrum. We have students here, our future leaders and our greatest hope and inspiration for really beginning to dramatically bring down the levels of carbon in our atmosphere. And we have all the city leaders and the community leaders, civic leaders, who, as was mentioned earlier, really have defied national trends and lowered our carbon footprint over the last 10 years here in Portland, even as the economy was growing. We have innovators in green infrastructure who save the city tens of millions of dollars by working with nature to manage our stormwater and runoff, and by doing so, they're also helping to build climate resiliency. And we have the artists and the musicians who help us see the world and hear the world in new ways and really inspire us to keep moving forward and doing better every day. We have farmers and food makers and food sharers who take time each week to grow food for others and help some of us learn how to grow food for ourselves, and they share that with less fortunate people in Oregon and really have created one of the most vibrant, local, generous, and caring food cultures in our nation. And I also want to mention, I suspect that we have here tonight many environmental champions and clean economy related businesses who live outside of Portland, because there really is environmental innovation and sustainable economic development success stories happening all over this amazing state, from our largest city to our smallest rural towns. You all really are a gift to our state and to our world, and I am absolutely honored to be here with you tonight. If I may brag a little bit, no offense, Amy, I think it's no surprise but still a very great honor that the United Nations Environment Program took notice of Portland and heard about the amazing work that's happening here, the work that we have done and are doing. So I want you to take a moment and pat yourselves on the back. Literally. Very good, very good. And give yourselves a round of applause. Okay, enough already, enough of that. Because for all that we've done, there's still so much more to do. We haven't done anywhere near enough. We need to do much more. We need to be much bolder in reducing our own personal environmental footprints and in making this transition to low carbon, environmentally restorative energy, food, transportation, and economic systems. I truly believe that that is the single biggest challenge and single biggest opportunity of our generations, and Portland is a world leader in moving in that direction. So I want to thank you for joining us, and I want to urge you to enjoy all of what World Environment Day has to offer. I want you to be inspired tonight, and I want to celebrate all the good work that has come before and that is yet to come, and then go out and make it happen because the earth is counting on us. Thank you.
So thank you, Sylvia, and it's an honor to have you join us. Now I'd like to introduce a very special guest and my new friend, Amy Frankel. She is the director of the United Nations Environment Program Regional Office of North America. Amy has an amazing background of focused on environmental protection and environmental law, and I think most importantly, she had the remarkable good sense and wisdom to choose Portland this year as the place where we should be celebrating World Environment Day. So please welcome Amy.
Thank you very much and good evening. I want you to know I changed my flight to stay here, and I'm very glad I did because it's really a great way to cap off a week of World Environment Day. So I think I'm going to still say Happy World Environment Day, everyone. And I came out in April around Earth Day where we launched the series of events that culminated in this week's events. And it was a beautiful, beautiful time when I came out there. Sun was shining, it was just gorgeous. And then look at the weather this week. So I really think, I'm beginning to suspect that you Portlanders, you have a secret oath that you take. And you say, when you have visitors from outside, you tell them it rains all the time. This is really unusual. So I'm gonna come back, test that. But seriously, World Environment Day, it's really about bringing awareness to the issues that UNEP and Portland and others are working on every day. It is an international day. It's the United Nations Day for the Environment, and it is celebrated all over the world. Seriously, colleagues of mine and other parts of the UN and cities that we've been in continue the tradition and use it as a platform. And I have to say, I think we've now raised awareness not only in the city about World Environment Day, but back in Washington with the congressional delegation, because we've got, Ron Wyden and others, who are saying the words World Environment Day. So thank you to Portland for that, because you really raised awareness at very high levels in the U.S. government. The UNEP works on many, many different kinds of issues, and what I've come to realize is that working at the city level is probably one of the most effective things that we can do. And if you look at the logjam at the international level, where I work, and some different negotiations that we're aware of, such as the climate negotiations, we look at the politics, in the federal government, some of the polarization that's going on. And I did used to work in the U.S. Senate, and things were a little bit better in terms of what we could get done across the aisle. And I think that mood, everyone would agree, has changed. And so you look at where is there energy and action to move forward on these issues. And I truly believe that it's at the city level. So it's been wonderful to be here and to see some of the great examples of what Portland is doing. The theme of World Environment Day this year was on food and food waste and loss. And so I actually learned and was very pleasantly surprised to meet with some of the experts here in Portland about what's going on, to learn that there's been, I think, one of the earliest, if not the earliest, professional staff in the city assigned to those issues, I think going back 9 years, linking food waste and use to sustainability, looking at the food bank programs, bringing in businesses, the nonprofit sector. So it was extremely inspiring. And clearly Portland has a lot to teach and share with other cities in this region as well as around the world. And I'll come back to that because I'm not going to let you guys go. So cities, the reason why that is so important is if you look at what's going to happen around the world on population growth. And right now, we're just over 7 billion people on the planet, which is quite an increase already if you look at our history as a species. But we're going to grow to at least 9 billion. 9 billion is really a conservative estimate by the year 2050. 2050, that's very close, it's less than 50 years away. And most of that growth is going to be in the developing world, and most of it's going to be in cities. So what's going to happen is, especially in sub-Saharan Africa and in Asia in particular, there's going to be incredible city growth, incredible numbers of cities of 1 million or more people added, literally hundreds of cities added from what we have today. And you see that happening already in places like China, just bursts of urbanization. So we have a lot of work to do together. And the fact is, those cities and what happens and how they develop is extremely relevant to each one of us here. Because if it's done in a conventional way, then we're going to have a lot of greenhouse gases added, a lot of water used, a lot of biodiversity lost, and it's going to affect our lives and how we are. It's a very connected, both ecologically and in terms of global trade. So we need to join at the city level, at the individual level, through the UN, through our state, city, federal, and international forums and entities to try to work together on these issues. Now, what UNEP is doing that I really feel absolutely proud of and believe in, and I was so happy when I joined UNEP about 5 years ago, that our executive director was focused on this thing he calls a green economy. And we can call it lots of things, but the point is that environment can't be an afterthought. I mean, the environment and this natural earth is where we get all of the things that we use to live, where every species on the planet gets its livelihood. And the conventional, Western industrialized view of the environment has been, it's later, something you do later. You deal with that once you've developed. And that message has gotten to developing countries, and we're trying to turn that around. And we're trying to bring the message that if you don't have a healthy, sustainable environment and approach to the environment, then you cannot develop, in fact. And it's actually worse for poverty and people who rely on natural resources for their well-being. So we're doing that through a lot of analytical work. I'm glad to see so many of the universities here. That's essential to what we do. And that's the message we're bringing. Businesses are also doing amazing work, and I had a few interesting meetings with CEOs and other high-level folks from businesses that are really at the head of the curve saying, we need a new business model, and we need not just net zero, damage to the environment. We want to give back. We want to have a plus sign at the end of our business operations to show that actually we can operate in a way that there's a net gain to the environment when we do our operations. It's possible. We just have to turn around the thinking. So I really want to challenge all of you to, Portland, we did select Portland because there's so many great examples of what has been done here and what can be done. And I think you all are so humble you might not even realize what you're doing is innovative and could be very, very useful to places outside of Portland. I know some of that's going on, but we really hope to come back and bring Portland into our network, which is global, and we work with all different types of folks. It's not just the governments, but we really would love to bring Portland and its great examples along and also see even more done here. Because we're not there yet, and it's a bit scary when I look at some of the reports I get to read. But I'm extremely optimistic. You have to be in this business, and I think this has energized me. I hope the week has energized you all, and I really look forward to working together in the future. Lastly, I absolutely need to say some thank yous, and there are too many people to thank by name, but I do want to thank First Lady Hayes. It's a privilege. We just had a minute of chatting and about ocean issues, which I'm very passionate about. Mayor Hales and his wife Nancy, who I also had a chance to meet, and she's doing some great work as well on these issues. The World Environment Day Committee, which is many of you here in the audience I know, led by Ann Nelson from the Bureau of Environmental Services. Dean, who I had a chance to meet back in April, and Susan from two key entities here at the city level. So thanks to both of you so much for all that you've done. Rose Festival folks, I mean, I've met a lot of people. The schedule was incredible. So thank you all. I hope to talk to as many of you as possible for the end of the evening. And just thanks for what you're doing every day. I look forward to collaborating in the future. So thanks.
Well, thank you, Amy. It's really a great honor to have you in our community again. And of course, all of us here look forward to working with you in a continuing partnership into the future. Our next guest is a sociology instructor at Portland Community College. As an environmental sociologist, she's very interested in the relationship of people to their environment. Last summer, she served as the higher education representative for North America at the United Nations Rio +20 Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro. That experience led to her effort to create a Portland Regional Center of Expertise on Education for Sustainable Development through the United Nations University System. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Kim Smith.
Well, hello. So lovely to be here. And I want to actually really recognize Ann Nelson as well for inspiring us yesterday with recognizing that so many people in our community tend to become kind of cynical and say no, and that tonight we're celebrating yes. And there are a lot of people in this room who actually say yes, and we're aptly named an innovation celebration. So thank you very much, Anne. So yes, last summer I had the fortunate opportunity to represent higher education in Rio, working with the United Nations, which was fabulous. And I'm used to moving, so this is going to be hard to stand still. But higher education was able to, the whole coalition around the world was able to identify the role that education can play in helping us create a sustainable world. And thankfully, we were finally included as a stakeholder and developed many, actually 8 specific articles within the future we want. And I was introduced to the United Nations University System and the work with regional centers. So I want to just introduce just a couple, I'm going to keep this very brief, but introduce what's happening around the world through education. And so the United Nations University System has developed what's called RCEs, the Regional Centers of Expertise on Education for Sustainable Development. And there are 117 of these around the world, but only 2 in the United States. One in Texas and one in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And we just felt how very wrong that Portland is not here as a center of expertise. So we have an amazing group of folks out here, and I want to do a shout out to, let's get a little whoop from the audience. Who are our application committee folks here? Just quick. All right, make a little sound. Yay, all of our folks. So we just turned in our first draft of our application Monday night. So tonight we're celebrating to be, yes, and we have established the Greater Portland Metro region as our area, and recognizing this lovely seahorse of the ecoregion of the Willamette Valley as well. There's obviously lots of good people who are working in Eugene and Corvallis, but we're going to focus right now on these areas. The green stars up here are sustainability providers. We have PCC students creating a GIS map. And so who are already our members of the RCE? Make a little whoop of this. Who are you? Got a whole group of them out here. Yay! Thank you. And we have a table out there and all kinds of information. So if you want to get involved, obviously, where this is a call out for please join us. So especially if you believe in this vision So this is a cross-sector effort with K-12, colleges, nonprofits, government, and the media, all folks who are working in formal and informal, non-formal education for sustainable development. So it's a wonderful, wonderful collaborative partnership, hopefully to increase our impact, our collective impacts, wanting to make sure that we aren't just sustaining, that we're thriving, right? We want to create a vibrant relationship across our network. Hopefully connecting, communicating, working with, creating some new systems so we can actually cross-pollinate our efforts and transform education. And hopefully also identify ways that we can raise public awareness around policy and align a lot of our work with the state, with the region. So I welcome all of you in getting involved and look forward to seeing where we go in the future. Thank you.
So thank you, Kim. You know, when we talk about partnerships in Portland, we cannot overstate the importance of our higher education system. And my office, Dean's office, city bureaus, we can't always afford to go out and get the kind of technical expertise that we want. And we often build these amazing partnerships with different Oregon colleges and universities. They provide us really with the academic expertise that we need to both develop innovative new solutions, but also very practical solutions. And I think that's a great partnership in terms of being the high-minded, sort of having the time to think out the big solutions, but bringing them to the city where we're in the streets and having to solve everyday problems. So among those partners is Dr. Jennifer Allen, the director of the Institute for Sustainable Solutions at PSU. We've worked together for more than a decade, maybe much more, on probably a dozen different projects. And if you know her, you know that she is a quiet, consistent, formidable force for bringing quality analysis and research to help Portland become a more sustainable city. So please join me in greeting Jennifer.
It's funny, my husband doesn't think I'm so quiet. So it's wonderful to be here this evening and part of this celebration. And I'm going to start off telling you something you already know, which I find relaxes my students a bit. They go, oh, this isn't so hard, I already knew that. Which is that, and echoing some of Sylvia's comments, you know, the challenges we face are complicated. And they're pretty immense, and a lot of them really don't fit the way we've traditionally organized ourselves or thought about the kinds of challenges we as a society need to face. Even the term environment doesn't adequately capture something like climate change, which is really clearly an environmental issue, but a social issue, an economic issue, an institutional issue. So we really need to think about, you know, how do we approach these things? And you know, the tagline in most of my classes is, it's complicated. So whether I'm teaching water policy or sustainable development, and if my students begin to get that, they're on their way to getting an A. So if we recognize that it's complicated, I think what that does is then challenge us to recognize we can't approach things in a sort of business as usual way. And we really do need to look for these partnerships, because government alone, business alone, higher ed alone, nonprofits alone can't solve these problems. And so how can we really align our resources and unleash all of our assets towards solving some of these problems? And I think just picking up on Susan's comment, one of the exciting things about working in Portland and working in Oregon in the Pacific Northwest is that we do have a culture of these public-private partnerships, and of recognizing that we really collectively need to link arms in order to move forward. And that makes this a place that I think really can be a leader nationally and internationally. It's what we hear from visitors, is that there's something different here, and that this ability to partner is one of them. You know, but to continue to really create the partnerships, bring the different perspectives that we need together, we need to continue to lower the walls, both within our organizations and between our organizations, so that we can create those pathways for collaboration that can really allow us to solve these problems. And I think the Regional Center for Expertise that Kim just mentioned is a terrific example of just that. How do we really ramp up on our networks and think about how do we define our common goals and work toward them together? So speaking about higher ed, and let me just call out all the folks from higher ed are in the audience, community colleges, higher education, just a round of applause for everybody here, because I know we have a great showing here of folks from higher ed. But I think we need to step up and really play an even more of a leadership role in both defining some of these issues and looking at the solutions. Because, traditionally higher education has been able to sort of justify itself on a little bit of a parallel track to the rest of society. The ivory tower idea, a place of reflection. We've sort of deluded ourselves that students can sit in classrooms and learn things there, and that's how they're going to learn things. And I think we're beginning to realize that there really is a much richer way to engage in both learning and in contributing to society. I think community colleges have always been leaders in this, more than some other institutions of higher ed. And while I think there may always be a role for higher education in providing a place for reflection and for allowing people to maybe step back and take a longer view and dig deep in ways that it's hard for other institutions to do it, I think the urgency of the issues we face and also what we know now about how people learn really demands that the value proposition of higher education needs to mean that we get outside of our walls and we engage really much more intensively with community partners in figuring out what we're going to do to address these issues. And really, how do we take a more active role in problem solving and in giving our students a chance to really have the experiences they need to become part of the solution in the future. And so there are a lot of examples I'm going to talk about just briefly in Portland State, but I know there are a lot out there in the rest of higher ed. We're really working to create more pathways for students, more opportunities for them to learn by being out in the community, engaged in understanding, yes, these things are complicated, but really being able to learn the skills of collaborative and innovative problem solving, and maybe even fail at some things, okay? To try some things, and maybe they don't work out, but to recognize that by trying, by having the courage to attempt something, and then learning from it, that's success too. And we need to do more of that. We need to create more safe places for people to try things out and see if we can really create some good solutions. Just this weekend at Portland State, there were over 40 folks from higher ed across the country at a Living Lab workshop, which is co-sponsored by the Association for the Advancement of Sustainability in Higher Education, really looking at how do we take our campuses and make them experiment stations. How do we really create opportunities for students and community partners to use our college campuses to try things out? And again, what if we fail? That's okay. Let's learn from it. Let's be transparent about that. We're launching a Sustainable Neighborhoods Initiative, which is, again, how do you more intentionally engage with community partners to figure out what some of the things are we need to resolve on the equity side, on the environmental side, and really engage together in solving those problems. We've recently started to use the term research to action. We had a symposium on research to action, which is, again, prompting our professors to talk about their research with each other, but then to also say, how is that relevant to the things that the community is trying to address? And we really need to do more about that and think about our whole city and our community as an experiment station where we collectively, government, businesses, educational institutions, are trying out ways to solve these problems and learning from them. A term we've increasingly been using at Portland State, but I know also elsewhere in the community, is collective action. And I think, Kim, you might have even had that on one of your slides. And that's really a framework to recognize that a lot of institutions have a lot of different roles to play and a lot of different assets and a lot of different capacity. But if we can take the time to identify those common goals that we're working to try to solve, and then we align our resources and our assets toward those goals, we really can collectively move the needle a lot more effectively. So we're asking, what can government agencies do? What can higher ed do? What can nonprofits do? And how do we recognize that we can address our, attempt to achieve our individual goals, but also really do that collectively in a way that moves them forward? So, I really want to invite us all, higher education, government, business, community groups, to engage in the co-production of knowledge, okay? Because the knowledge doesn't sit in the universities. It doesn't sit in higher ed. We all know that, right? We need to co-produce it. We need to figure out what are those really compelling issues? What are those questions we need to answer? How do we test them? How do we adapt as we go along? And how do we commit together to a continual learning process to make this world a more sustainable place? And then I'm just going to end with a quote from Donella Meadows, which is, there's too much bad news to justify complacency, but there's too much good news to justify despair. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. That was very interesting. The concept of co-production, I love that idea. We have all these talented people in higher education available to us in this community, and I know we're taking advantage of that now, but we need to do more. That's the call to action, I think, that I just heard from that. Now I want to invite up a person who served as senior advisor to former Metro Council President David Bragdon. During that time, he founded Metro's Regional Leadership Initiative, and managed the Metro Council strategic planning initiatives. And today, he's the executive director of the Intertwine Alliance. Please join me in welcoming Mike Wetter.
Thanks. So Jennifer, I absolutely loved what you said about partnerships and coalitions. That was wonderful and very inspired, and that, of course, leads in perfectly to what I'm going to say. So I'm actually going to summarize what I've heard over the last 6 weeks from the UN in 6 seconds. We were recognized by the UN because we reduce our footprint, compost our table scraps, return our cans, contain our sprawl, recycle our plastic, sequester our carbon, ride our bikes, prune our trees, acquire our natural areas, renature our backyards, manage our stormwater, and protect our fish. So you got to ask, what is it about us, right? I mean, is it like something in the water or the air, or what is it about this place and about us? And I've only got a few minutes up here, so I'm going to get right to the point. The real story behind the story is about leadership. And if leadership were easy, everyone would do it, right? And tonight, they'd be celebrating, I mean, Houston or Des Moines or somebody would be celebrating being chosen by the UN, and that's not the case. There's something here that we've done, and the reality is that leadership almost always involves difficult choices and a willingness to do hard things for a greater vision. We've done that here. But the choices in the future aren't going to get any easier. And the question, of course, is will we continue to innovate and challenge the status quo? Will we recognize that investments in nature actually are essential services and becoming more essential every day? So I think the answer is yes, and I have 2 pieces of evidence that I'm going to offer you today. The first is a project I'm very close to. Our leadership has always come, as Jennifer said, and actually Susan and Dean before her, from a lot of different places. From the business community, environmental organizations, activists, utilities, government officials, elected officials, essentially from all of you. And collaboration has always been central to our approach, to our leadership. So a few years ago, a handful of people proposed creating a coalition that could be a permanent force for leadership in our region. And you responded, and that coalition has grown from 4 organizations, 4 founding organizations, to, oops. Oh, there's something missing here. Well, there was supposed to be an image there. There are currently 92 organizations in the Intertwine Alliance, and I had the image of them up here for you. But 92 organizations have joined forces behind this vision of this region being a different kind of place. And it goes everywhere. The range goes from corporate and private organizations such as PGE, Keen Footwear, Columbia Sportswear, ODS, to the nonprofit community, Audubon Society, Urban Green Spaces Institute, Friends of Trees, to the public agencies. And so there's this really phenomenal thing. And we're just getting started with 92. Could this have worked just anywhere? I don't think so. So secondly, a month ago, the Intertwine Alliance put out a call to the region's elected officials, and we specifically asked for leadership on stormwater management, urban tree canopy, and natural areas. And we're going to be holding this conversation over the course of a full year. But in the first week alone, 18 elected officials from the region stepped forward and said, yes, we'll help lead that. So I want to take a moment to recognize them and thank them for their continued leadership. That's the challenge, actually. This is the language behind the challenges that we put out related to, again, stormwater, urban forest canopy, and natural areas. And here's who stepped forward so far. And I'm going to read the names, and there are actually just a few of them that were able to make it here tonight, and I'm going to invite them to step forward as I read the names. So Congressman Earl Blumenauer, Multnomah County Chair Jeff Kogan, Metro Councilor Carlotta Collette, Metro Councilor Shirley Craddock, who's here. And again, I'm going to invite you elected officials to step up because I've got 8 minutes up here is what I promised Ann Nelson, so we're going to need to do this quickly. So please come up now on the stage. State Senator Richard Devlin, State Senator Jackie Dingfelder, who was here earlier and had to leave. Metro Councilor Craig Dirksen, Charlie Hales, Mayor of Portland, Metro Council President Tom Hughes, Tim Levitt, Mayor of Vancouver, Greg Malinowski, Washington County Commissioner, Doug Neely, Mayor of Oregon City, Dan Salzman, Portland Commissioner. We've got no elected officials on stage yet. I've never known electeds to be so shy. Dick, this is really it. Dick Scout, Washington County Commissioner, Clackamas County Commissioner Martha Schrader, Metro Councilor Bob Stacy, Steve Stewart, Clark County Commissioner, and Peter Truex, Mayor of Forest Grove. And so these are just, as I say, we're just getting started on this. These are the first of what we expect to be a quite a number of elected officials from the region who, again, are pledging to lead the next wave, lead the next thing. And so we're going to do a little ceremony here to recognize that, recognize their leadership, and thank them for it. And what we're going to do is just have them ceremonially sign here, pledging to continue to lead. And as I said earlier, the elected officials are just one group of leaders that we have in our region, and the rest, of course, are all of you. And so we'll have this available outside after this event at the reception for any of you that would also like to sign your names to it. And I'm going to invite them to say very, very briefly just a few things about what their vision is for what's next before they sign on. And do we have a pen? Do we have a pen here someplace? I got it. Okay. Who wants to start?
Well, I want to congratulate and thank the City of Portland for all that you've done and to be selected to help have the celebration today, host the celebration in Portland. So congratulations. And obviously we have 28 cities and counties in our region. Portland is one of those, and of course they're the largest and you lead the way. But 24 other cities are also doing a lot to help influence climate change. And one of the big projects, thanks to the state legislature, and I think there were some legislators here earlier today, but the Metro region has been asked to lead the way on doing what we can to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 20% by 2035 from vehicles and small trucks. And so we are moving forward with that, called the Climate Smart Scenarios, and we've done a lot already. Because of the way our region has grown, where we focus our development in our centers, our regional centers and our town centers, we've gotten a long ways already. It's going to be that last about 20% of that 20% is going to be the most challenging. And so you'll be learning and hearing more about this coming up in the next year or so. But we are moving forward, and our goal is by 2035 we'll have reduced our greenhouse gas emissions as a metro region, the 1.6 million people that live here in this area, by 20%. And so from 1990 some levels. So thank you for your interest, thank you for your support, thank you for all you do. Keep riding those bicycles and that MAX train and those buses. That really makes a big difference.
Dick Scout on the Washington County Board of Commissioners. First of all, I wanted to say congratulations to City of Portland. They have been a leader in many ways in the region. But there are new players coming too, and I think there's emerging power in the region, Washington County. We've got 530,000 people in the region, in our county, excuse me, and Clean Water Services, which we are actually Board of Directors for, are doing some fantastic work. The Tualatin Hills Park and Rec District is a very strong district and doing some terrific things. And I think the political tea leaves say that Washington County can be a terrific partner with Portland and Multnomah, and I think together we can be very powerful and do a great deal, and I look forward to that happening, and I think it will happen. So, thank you.
as mayor of Forest Grove, and you know that better as the last bathroom on the way to the coast. That works every time. Our ad hoc sustainability committee is established in Forest Grove to further define our responsibility to this planet and, more importantly, to our posterity. We are doing things out there for a generation we will never see, and that's important. The three legs of sustainability that we are concerned about and we will continue to work on, it's going to be difficult, but it is doable: environmental, economic, and social justice. Thank you.
Terrific. So let's have a round of applause for leadership for these leaders and for all of the leaders in the room. I think it shows that we don't intend to rest on our laurels and that we will continue to be a global leader. Thank you.
So don't forget to sign on when you get out there. So I want to thank Mike and all of our elected officials. I think the Intertwine and our Common Ground concept is an amazing one. It's going to be an ongoing conversation, an ongoing challenge for all of us to do more. So our next guest is an environmental this is a lot of syllables in one sentence. An environmental photojournalist and writer. He's based right here in Portland. He documents nature, the environment, biodiversity, and climate change from around the world. His images and articles have appeared in several different magazines, from Time to Discover, Smithsonian, National Geographic, and Scientific American. I think he got my subscription list. That's pretty good. His major focus, I didn't include my teenage daughter's ones in there. I don't know what those are, but his major focus since 2000 has been the world view of global warming, the photo documenting of rapid climate change. So please welcome Gary Brash.
Hi, everybody, and I might respectfully suggest those of you beneath the podium, so you can get a view of the screen. I'm going to shift everybody's view to the screen again here for the next few minutes. I'm very happy to be here. I'm now looking for the clicker.
Here it is, Gary.
Get any order of pictures he wanted there. Okay, thank you. And so we will lower the lights now a little bit, and especially that one. And let me have this one, if you would. So thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks to the UNEP and the City of Portland, the World Environment Day Committee, and the many helpful citizens of Portland. I'm honored to be here. As a photographer and journalist, I'm blessed to be from Oregon and from Portland. I began my career here, and along the way photographed many of the landscapes and the wonderful creatures here. My first big story for Audubon magazine was about the ancient temperate rainforest and the threatened spotted owl, a fight to protect wilderness that still goes on. More recently, I was back in the woods for Smithsonian magazine. The owls are in a slow decline, but they persist, as these two fledglings told me. My work has taken me far from Oregon now to report on environment and climate change. But sometimes when I'm about as far away from home as one could get, I sometimes see someone who looks somehow vaguely kind of familiar. I was in the Himalayas for the first time last year, thanks to the Karuna Foundation. I wanted to photograph the source of the sacred Ganges River, and on the way in Gangotri village in the upper river, I was privileged to meet Swami Sundaranda. He's a sadhu, a mountaineer, a great photographer, the Ansel Adams of the Himalayas of northern India. He welcomed us into his tiny house. He understood immediately what I was about because we are really on the same track. He showed me some of his photographs. He was eloquent and passionate about the changes he has seen over 40 years in the Himalayas, lamenting the population and the pollution and the growth of cities. After several hours of learning from him, it was time for me to go upriver, and so he said, go photograph that glacier. And here's what I saw 2 days later. The largest tributary of the Ganges emerging as a whole river from a glacier which is receding like nearly every ice sheet in Himalayas and in the world. This place, this wall of ice from which the river flows, is a very sacred place. The Ganges, of course, provides the sustenance and the spiritual center for more than 1 billion people. The retreat and loss of glaciers everywhere is one of the central and most well-known facts of rapid unnatural climate change, and it is central to my work since 1999. This is one example, the Athabasca Glacier in Jasper, up in Canada, in a historic 1917 photograph, and in 2005. The issue is not merely the loss of scenery, it's the flooding now as more ice melts, and soon the complete loss of that water for ecosystems and humans downriver. My vision of reporting on climate change was to follow the scientists and to try to photograph where they worked and what they saw, to make science and the data real, to make global warming visible. My first big mission was to the Antarctic Peninsula, thanks to the National Science Foundation. There on the Antarctic Peninsula, temperatures are more than 6 degrees warmer than 50 years ago, and the Adelie penguins are feeling the heat. The penguins here are not as successful raising chicks now because the penguins eat krill that is under the nearshore ice, and there is less ice in the summer. We know this because of Bill Fraser, an ecologist and ornithologist who was one of my first mentors about climate science. He epitomizes the work of scientists, my heroes. Long months in the field each year, more than 35 years now, observing and counting and building a record. This is how we know what we know about climate change. Obviously, the penguins like him. So he keeps in business there. At the opposite pole, on an island off of Barrow, Alaska, in the Arctic Ocean, another ornithologist is documenting a similar story. This is George Devokie, who studies black guillemot seabirds. Here he's checking a nest box. The loss of Arctic sea ice is a big story. Last September, you will recall, the ice reached the smallest summer extent ever observed. George's observations for 40 years here show that, like the penguins down south in Antarctica, the guillemots can't find enough food under the ice as it retreats hundreds of miles to the north. The entire ecosystem of the Arctic is disrupted. Polar bears are often stuck on land rather than on the sea ice they need, and more than 50 of them have wandered through George's study area, sometimes eating guillemots in their hunger. Scientists now, and for the last several decades, have been everywhere documenting climate change, and the results that they have are powerful. Entomologist Camille Parmesan, another one of my early mentors, is searching for butterflies here in the south of France. She was the first to document in 1996 that an animal's entire range of existence was being affected by rising temperatures. This is her study subject, Edith's checker spot butterfly. Some of you will know this creature. This one's laying eggs on an annual plant. This insect can no longer live at the southern, warmer part of its former range, and it is found much farther north in Canada now. By now, hundreds of species have been documented shifting toward the poles as climate zones shift unpredictably. Fish, too, and coral reefs are changing. Now, this is a part of the Great Barrier Reef that is still healthy. But researchers like Cardin Wallace, here studying a damaged reef in Indonesia, are finding that there's increasing warmth in the ocean waters, which is pushing corals past the temperatures which they can survive. Also, because oceans have absorbed nearly half the carbon dioxide humans have emitted, their chemistry is changing, getting more acidic, which is an issue in Oregon and Northwest for oyster growers. In the mountains, ecosystems are being pushed up toward the narrow rocky summits. This is a long-term study of alpine wildflowers in the Austrian Alps. Another mountaintop has recently been in the news. This is the summit of Mauna Loa on Hawaii's Big Island, and it's where NOAA and Scripps directly measure the CO2 in the atmosphere. How warm the atmosphere is mediated by CO2 and other greenhouse gases. The tower on the right is the air intake. This is where Charles Keeling started his observations in the 1950s, giving us a continuous daily record of rising CO2 emissions, the Keeling curve. We were there about 2 years ago, and the observing scientist that day, John Barnes, captured a bit of air in a vial. The concentration that day, as you can read, was 392.65 parts per million. As you know, we got to 400 parts per million a few weeks ago in only two more years. This is an extraordinary increase, and it's the highest level of CO2 that scientists can register in about the last 3 million years. This current increase is so rapid that scientists are expecting even more drastic changes than they have already measured. But around the world, billions of people don't have to have science to tell them the world is changing, or it's getting warmer, or more unpredictable. These Bangladeshis, like most people on the planet, are very poor, very tied to their land or neighborhood. They're not creating very much global warming pollution, but they are very much on the edge of change. This rice-growing village south of Dhaka in Bangladesh is suffering from increased erosion from tides and floods coming down the Ganges and the Brahmaputra rivers. Scientists now estimate that sea level around the world, but here as well, will rise another meter, 3 feet, by the end of this century. And one can see where these people and their rice paddies will be. Every coastal area is already being overrun by higher seas and stronger storms. This native village in Alaska, Shishmaref, loses sometimes 60 feet a year as the island is eroded away. Out in a boat with Todi Wairana, who lives there, he shows me where the shore and his family home was when he was a boy 30 years ago. This Inupiat village is going to move inland away from its traditional oceanside location where they hunt seals. Native cultures across the Arctic are threatened by loss of ice and warming of the tundra. Elders like Elisipi Ulishatak on Baffin Island, Canada, can point to pictures showing how many warm clothes they needed to wear in summer when she was a young mother. Today, it's t-shirts. Far to the southwest on the globe, on the other side, in the remote Pacific, South Pacific, tiny coral islands are now subject to tidal flooding as well. In Tuvalu, the salt water comes right up through the ground into homes and gardens. Islands which are already at the end of the modern transportation network for goods and food already have a huge trash and sanitation problem. And now higher tides compound that by floating filth and garbage right into the villages. In Tuvalu, we met geologist Paul Kench, who's at the computer here, who is using surveying and modern Google mapping to help officials in Tuvalu learn which houses are most at risk from the expected 1 meter sea level rise and stronger storms. This nation of only 12,000 people, the smallest in the world, is trying to adapt and to get ready if they need to move their lives and their Pacific Island culture. And we go from sea level to the highest mountains in the world, climate change, where climate change is the daily fact for millions of villagers and farmers. These are the Himalayas. That's Mount Everest under the banner cloud. We went to India, Nepal, and Bhutan, mostly to see how climate change affects heavily populated foothills. In northern India and across this band of mountains, villages are intensely integrated with their terraced fields. This is wheat growing in this area. It's about 9,000 feet in India. You can see the result of some landslides over to the right. They're already common in this steep, unconsolidated part of the Himalayas. But increasingly, villages like this one in Nepal are isolated by huge landslides that last for years, made much worse by intense storms, which is a hallmark of global warming. Everywhere we find people doing good work, however, and getting on with their lives, there are fast-changing water shortages and temperature changes on these steep valleys. This is Melpalemo Tamang. She's a single mom farmer. She brought 1,500 strawberry plants. She bought 1,500 strawberry plants in Kathmandu and brought them 70 miles back to plant under plastic she got from the World Wildlife Fund. This is the first commercial berry field in this part of Nepal. In a nearby village, farmers were dissatisfied with hybrid seeds they got from the Nepalese government and from an international seed company. They might have lost the whole local rice plantings, but in fact, they know that their other local seeds grow better, and now they have a seed bank, and they're doing test plantings as conditions change on their terraces. Millions of women in this region and in Africa and other continents still cook on open indoor fires of wood or grass or dung. A severe health issue for the families, and also a cause of air pollution and glacier melting from the black soot that's created. But in Nepal, we saw a great solution: biogas generators, which digest not only animal waste and farm waste, but also human waste. Each home in this small village has one, and the gas is piped into the house, and mothers like Sangeeta Ghale here are just ecstatic about how clean their kitchens are, and a great cup of tea, I might add. So in these villages of biogas, the pollution, the tree cutting, the time spent gathering firewood, and global warming emissions are all greatly reduced. And of course, climate change and the effects of our addiction to oil is affecting Americans as well, and often the poor are affected the most. We met a fishing family of the Pointe aux Chênes Native Americans in the Louisiana Delta. Not only is their village going under from rising sea levels and intense oil drilling and canal building from the oil industry, but then came the BP oil spill, cutting off their fishing for months. The fishing is back, but long-term effects of the spill remained under study, and of course we are still drilling in the Delta and the Gulf. The world's appetite for petroleum is so far insatiable. So this is the Arctic Ocean, and along the horizon is the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. It's protected from oil drilling on land, but it is still under threat from Shell's plans to drill only 12 miles offshore. This photo was made last fall when Shell's rig was in place for preliminary work. Shell says they won't come back this year, but this entire wild coast in Arctic Ocean is at risk from their plans, which of course are subject to US government approval. And coal, the biggest polluter, the biggest climate polluter, not to mention the mercury, the sulfur, and the other poisons that are somewhat under control by the Clean Air Act, but not so far the CO2. This is in West Virginia, by the way. If the EPA acts to control power plant emissions under the law, the invisible CO2 belching from those skinny stacks in the back will begin to be reduced. Stopping the use of coal is the most important change in our fossil fuel diet. And the US is using more natural gas, reducing coal use. But what about the fracking and the water pollution and the land abuse as we race to extract gas? There are many alternatives. The air pollution from climate and other issues are huge issues for cities. This is Chicago in 1995. A heat wave there killed about 800 people. Across every continent, heat waves are increasing, and so are droughts. Last summer, we drove our Prius across the Midwest and saw burned and stunted corn from Illinois all the way across to Colorado. The Great American Drought of 2012 was the most intense in NOAA history and the most extensive since the 1950s. The corn harvest was at least 13% below normal. And we know the American coast, especially along the eastern seaboard, is being racked not only by storms like Sandy, but also by the persistent increase in sea level and wave height. This is North Carolina in 2011, where they lose about 12 feet a year, even if there aren't any hurricanes. In fact, the height of the largest waves on the Pacific Ocean is up to 1 meter higher now, meaning the biggest storm waves are up to 1 meter higher as they come across the Pacific Ocean. This bodes ill for our coasts, but it may be a source of wave power, which of course is now being tested in Oregon and other places. And so we've now returned to Oregon, which has an iconic mountain, which itself is a showcase of climate change. And here are my own pictures from back in my career come in as an archive of the before picture. This is Mount Hood at the end of the summer in 1984. Rocky, yes, but with lots of snowpack still left. Now, in the end of the summer, like in 2006, one can see the loss of lake snowpack and the reduction in glacier size. The Sandy Glacier in the center is about 60% smaller now than it was first measured about a century ago. I'm really proud to be from Portland. It's a great town, and over the years of traveling around about climate change, I've told many people about the innovations and the climate change adaptations going on here. One can start with the trees and the urban forestry and the trail system and the watershed and river protection. Portland is a leader in green buildings. In this view, there are at least 15 LEED certified platinum or gold buildings. There are more LEED buildings down below on the south waterfront. This is one of my favorite LEED buildings in Portland, the 12 West building, with experimental wind turbines. To me, it's making a vision of what a more efficient energy-generating city will look like tomorrow. Portland has almost 400 eco-roofs now, like this one on the city building. And on the right is the new LEED Platinum Port of Portland building with its eco-roof. Out in the city, fantastic neighborhoods that are being enlivened and protected with encouragements to walk and to bike and to garden. Stormwater control and cleansing with rain gardens and street-side swales. It's very advanced in Portland. On the left is a huge water garden at the Coliseum, and then there are smaller ones all over, especially in Southeast. This is at People's Food Store. There are bigger projects too. This is Foster Floodplain, where a lot of us were in April from the air. They relocated willing families so that Johnson Creek could be reestablished as a working floodplain, a working meandering creek, to reduce the terrible yearly flooding brought on by overdevelopment. And of course, there's the trolley and the light rail system, the 4th largest in the nation. And there are now lots of outlets for electric cars, in case you're still driving. Portland and Oregon are also leaders in the control of sprawl, with an urban growth boundary which keeps farms and food and open space. They provide close to city residents. The farmers market system here is outstanding and directly results from having farms so close to town and a limit to urban growth. So I wanted to end in honor of Governor and Sylvia Hayes' recent trip to Bhutan and the recent visit of the Dalai Lama to Portland with Bhutan's message about environment and the source of happiness. It recognizes that development and wealth and the trappings of modern worldly life are important, but that nature is the source of not only all of our raw materials and food, but even of happiness itself. In Portland, we try to stay happy and weird by learning to take care of our natural legacy. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. I just want to take a moment to thank my donors and friends and editors and publishers who made most of this work possible. And I'll be outside afterwards to answer questions if you care to have any. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Gary. What a compelling story with pictures and that narration. It is stunning to think that a story like that can be waved off with a brush of the hand back in the nation's capital as junk science or something. And we have a lot more work to do, so please keep taking those magnificent photographs and please keep telling the story that you have been telling. It gives me hope yet that we can turn the tide. So to close our program tonight, we have a real treat for you. We have Bella Gaia, which means beautiful earth. It's a poetic vision of Earth from space. You're about to enjoy a multimedia performance blending NASA images of Earth from space with music. Please join me in welcoming award-winning filmmaker, music producer, and classically trained violinist Kenji Williams to join us this evening.
Yeah, it's fine. Thank you. It's an honor to be here. I just want to say a few short words about how this project came about, Bella Gaia, Beautiful Earth. I met a NASA astronaut, Mike Fink, who lived on the space station for 6 months and more. When I met him, I asked him, what is it that changed when you went to space? And he told me of his complete transformation the first time he looked out the window of the space station and saw our Earth with an atmosphere just 20 miles thick, a borderless world, and this living bubble of life floating in the blackness of space. And he had such a profound transformation, he came back to Earth with a much greater appreciation for our planet. And I was so inspired by Mike's story, it got me thinking, how could I bring this transformative experience that astronauts have to those of us who can't yet go to space? And thus began my journey of creating Bella Gaia. At the time, I had no idea what I was doing or how I would get there, but it was really an organic process, and on the way, received immense support from NASA. And it really became an experiment in figuring out, how do I take a flat map or a spreadsheet of data into something that can actually emotionally move somebody to even perhaps make somebody cry. And it has been an amazing experience and has succeeded to the degree that NASA now funds an education program where we use Bella Gaia to engage K-12 kids in earth science. I have personally had an experience of converting a climate skeptic in one show. So Bella Gaia exists actually in its full form as an 80-minute show with 5 musicians and dancers, and we tour around the world to performing arts centers. I'd love to bring it here to a theater someday. But today's show is a 12-minute solo version, but it's very special because we worked with the UN, with UNEP, in visualizing their data. And this project is called Hotspots to Hope Spots, and really looking at the incredible work that UNEP does and all the data and information that they collect from around the world, both satellite and demographic information. You'll see some things like population maps, hydrography of Africa, solar and wind energy output, and also change over time, time-lapse images of things, both hotspots, which are very rich, diverse places, but are problematic, but also inspiring hope that through our actions we can actually change things for the better. So without further ado, I'd love to thank Ann Nelson for making this happen, Amy Frankel, Elizabeth Gilboa, Ashwindu Singh from UNEP, this was really his vision to create this specific project, and also the Baum Foundation. So, and thank you all so much for doing what you're doing. Thank you.
waves and settled there with rain, I understood that we're all sailing in the same boat.
Wow. Stunning and so impressive. I can't wait to see the 80-minute version. Look, Susan, come on up. We're going to close this out. I want to ask Susan to come up and join me to do that. And there are a whole host of people. I was given a list of 30 people or so that worked on this. I just want to ask 3 people to come up and join Susan and me up here. And we want to ask you to thank them as they come up, when they come up. Ann Nelson, Colleen Mitchell, and Julia Thompson, who as I said, there were literally dozens of people that worked on this and lots of organizations that helped contribute time and financial resources to pull off not just this event, but all the events that have taken place this week. And we want to thank all of you who made this possible, and we want to thank you for coming. 2 things, please. Please help yourself to cookies in the lobby, and also there's a package of native seed for you to take with you, and also take your time and enjoy yourself as you leave. But anyone else have any parting thoughts? Thank you again very much.